Jim Parsons was extremely happy. The Big Bang Theory attracted 18 million viewers each episode thanks in large part to his character Sheldon Cooper. He was making $1 million every time the cameras rolled, and Forbes literally declares you the highest paid television actor on the planet. Then Jim was offered a mind-blowing contract of $50 million written on it. All he had to do was just play Sheldon for a few more seasons, but Jim said no. And it's because of this sinister motive tied to the Big Bang Theory. Jim Parsons' summer of 2018 was meant to be ordinary, but it wasn't. The events that transpired during the harsh months between seasons 11 and 12 were so intense and overwhelming that Parsons himself described them as nearly cosmic. Everything hit at once, and by the time the dust settled, the longest-running multi-camera sitcom in television history was finished. Let's start with the heartbreak. Jim and his spouse, Todd Spiewak, had 2 dogs. Since Jim was 31, they had raised them together. One of the dogs, which was 14 years old, was dying. During this period, Jim was in New York City, slogging through 8 Broadway productions each week in The Boys in the Band revival. But he wasn't simply on Broadway. When filming called for it, he would take a plane back to Los Angeles before returning to New York for another week of performances. The routine was incredibly hard and his dog's health was failing fast. He described one walk in the park immediately before a commercial shot. The dog had a horrible appearance. Parsons was hardly able to maintain composure due to his mental and physical exhaustion. His husband Todd reminded him they had commitments, that everyone had altered their plans to suit him. And Jim just broke down crying because he wasn't there for the dog he had spent 14 years of his life with. What option did he have, though? Jim's career was at its best at this point. He was more than just a celebrity on television. Everyone in Hollywood wanted a piece of his star power because he was so famous. The next day, Jim and Todd had to make the painful decision to put their cherished dog to sleep at home since Jim continued to balance his loyalty to his dog with his job. It appeared that Jim would be able to move on from this occurrence at this time, but he was unable to do so. And something else occurred right as he was coming to terms with losing his dog. Jim suffered a severe foot fracture while performing with the Boys in the Band a few days after putting his dog to sleep. Despite being in excruciating discomfort, he continued to perform without stopping. After that, he went to the hospital and discovered something terrifying. The human body is brittle and can break suddenly. For his roles, this actor required mobility. And he was recovering from an injury that might have ended his career. Jim had the impression that he was looking into a chasm. If he had been unable to return to the stage, what may have happened? How would the producers respond? If he failed everyone who relied on him, how would he manage it? However, he bounced back and returned to the stage. But he was still afraid of his own vulnerability. Then came the actual fear. This is when the darkness begins. Jim's father passed away at the age of 52. Jim was just 26 years old at the time. Parsons turned 45 in 2018. He began to calculate. He would be 47 years old at the conclusion of a possible season 14 deal, just 5 years from the age his father never attained. During his podcast interview, Parsons clarified that he is not superstitious or anything. It was merely a matter of context. He referred to it as context. However, what he actually meant was that everyone fears death, the clock, and the finish line, things that no one discusses. His dad never lived to be 53. What if Parsons' life was cut short by just 6 years? Did he want to wear the same superhero t-shirts and the same soundstage for those years, those priceless, irreplaceable years? He was plagued by the question and frantically looked for a solution. It appears that Sheldon is not an expert after all. Todd persisted in encouraging them to begin new artistic endeavors together in the interim. Jim was never available, even though That's Wonderful Productions, which they had created in 2015, had already secured a significant overall contract with Warner Brothers Television. He was constantly filming, performing, and working on another project. Todd wished to establish and make use of the production firm they had founded. However, Jim was bound by a contract that required him to film 8 episodes of The Big Bang Theory in Los Angeles over the course of around 22 weeks. Additionally, he performed 8 times a week on Broadway in New York. As if that weren't severe enough, he then agreed to play Henry Wilson in the Netflix limited series Hollywood. That's a few more weeks of hard shooting. Jim was continually traveling from coast to coast, learning new scripts, playing whole different roles, and maintaining the exact timing needed for both live theater and television. Additionally, he was obliged to work during what should have been his week off due to a commercial deal with Intel. He was worn out. His mind and body cried out for sleep. Together, all of his obligations had exhausted him. Then he started to wonder if he could continue The Big Bang Theory for another several years. Now he had a response. It was time to give up. After that terrible summer in New York, Jim moved back to Los Angeles in August of 2018. This choice had been weighing heavily on him for weeks. He was aware of his obligations. One Sunday, he visited Chuck Lorre's home. The Big Bang Theory was co-created by Chuck Lorre. Chuck was informed by Jim that he would not be signing for seasons 13 and 14. Chuck was supportive and even sympathetic about the decision, according to several accounts, and he understood right away. However, he also brought attention to the fact that both men were previously aware of. Without Sheldon Cooper, the show could not go on. The Big Bang Theory, as the title suggests, was based on Sheldon's theoretical physics research. No show, no Sheldon. Chuck made no attempt to persuade Parsons to reconsider. He didn't give him any more cash. He simply accepted it. A few days later, a table read, Johnny Galecki, Kay Cuoco, music, Simon Helberg, Kunal Nair, Mayim Bialik, and Melissa Rauch. The people he'd worked with for over a decade, his television family. Jim told them the same thing he had told Chuck when he gathered the cast in his dressing room. Everybody sobbed. Johnny Galecki later acknowledged that he was taken aback. Not because of Jim's choice per se, but rather because Jim approached the creators first rather than consulting his other actors, music, first. At that time, they were like a family. Jim ought to have visited them first. Perhaps he would have recognized Johnny's fatigue as well. After all this time, Johnny was already doubting his ability to execute successfully. Even those who were initially offended by the choice came to the conclusion that Jim could have been the only one with the courage to speak up. On August 22, 2018, CBS and Warner Brothers announced that the longest-running multi-camera sitcom in television history would conclude with season 12. Those were still huge, but not because of the ratings. The authors still had things to tell, so it wasn't due to creative tiredness, rather, it was because one of the show's key actors just said, music, no. Therefore, it wasn't simply one scene that caused Jim to leave the program. It was a mix of other factors, including the fact that after so much time on the air, the Big Bang Theory sequences were no longer as compelling. But that duration had given the actors a sense that the show was a part of them. Kay Cuoco wrote that she was crying uncontrollably on Instagram. Mayim Bialik expressed her feelings of thankfulness in her writing. People began to raise questions and the entertainment industry as a whole plunged into shock. Why would he leave? Why would anyone want to give up that much money and success? This is where chaos arises. There were rumors that Jim had received a $50 million contract from CBS for 2 further seasons. That figure was reiterated in every entertainment venue until it was taken for granted. Later on, however, Jim himself made a crucial clarification. In reality, there was no such contract, and Jim had accepted that amount of money. Would he, music, have stayed if he had been offered that amount of money? For seasons 13 and 14, CBS was in the early stages of talks. If the contract went through, the cast, especially the core 5, were anticipated to make about $50 million apiece, including profits. However, Jim made his choice before any official contracts were drafted. Sheldon Cooper's quest was over by the end of season 12. He had been awarded the Nobel Prize. Amy Farrah Fowler was his wife. He had changed from a strict, socially awkward genius to a person who could truly love and be friends. In one of the most moving speeches in sitcom history, he had made amends with his buddies. "It's like finishing a wonderful novel," Jim said. "Just because readers enjoy the book doesn't mean you should add more chapters. The story ends because you let it." So he did. After taking a look around, he made the decision to go. However, he did it elegantly. 18.5 million people watched The Big Bang Theory's 2-hour conclusion live. In the days that followed, millions more people streamed it. It turned into one of the most popular scripted endings of the previous 10 years. An appropriate farewell to a program that had dominated television for 12 years. Jim said he never regretted leaving, but he was worried he had made the wrong choice. Is he being truthful, in your opinion? Jim Parsons was a Texas theater kid before he became the best-paid actor on television. Jim was raised in the northern suburb of Spring after being born in Houston on March 24, 1973. His mother worked as a teacher. His father owned a plumbing supply business. With one exception, he had a typical household and a typical upbringing in music. Jim had known he wanted to be an actor since he was 6 years old. He played the Coca-Cola bird in a school production of The Elephant's Child. Then something clicked. He was not merely amused by it. He felt positive that this was what he was meant to accomplish with his life, as most 6-year-olds never feel about anything. But worry started to set in after high school. He attempted to give it all up. At first, he shied away from theater when he enrolled at the University of Houston. Convinced that choosing it as a career was too dangerous. His choice appeared sensible and prudent. It was the sort of choice that eases parents' sleep at night. It lasted for roughly 2 years. Jim came to one realization. When he wasn't acting, he was miserable. Music, consequently, he switched to theater as his major and never looked back. Jim was a busy student at the University of Houston. Over 3 years, he made 17 appearances in plays. Before it closed in 2007, Infernal Bridegroom Works, a theater company he co-founded, presented dozens of works. He started performing frequently at Houston's Stage's Repertory Theater. The man had an obsession. Jim realized he required additional training after graduating. After applying to graduate programs, he was accepted into the University of San Diego's prestigious 2-year program, where he taught in collaboration with the Old Globe Theater. That year, only 7 students were admitted. Rick Sear, the program director, later acknowledged that he was hesitant to accept Parsons. Jim has a very particular disposition. One of the reasons he's been so successful is his complete originality. However, we were concerned, does that translate to traditional theater? As it happens, it did. After earning his Master of Fine Arts degree in 2001, Parsons traveled to New York City right away to pursue his goals. Jim Parsons did not have a good time in New York. He had a tough time. He estimated that he tried out for 15 to 30 TV pilots. Occasionally, he would be cast, music, but no network would pick up the pilot. Occasionally, he would make it to return calls only to be turned down. He would occasionally fail to get past the first round. Television advertising and Broadway theater work were his main sources of income. He was given a brief cameo in the television program Ed in 2002. He played a small part in the independent movie Garden State in 2004. He was cast in a recurring role on Judging Amy in 2004. These were not significant breaks. These were jobs that barely covered the rent, survival jobs. He then tried out for The Big Bang Theory, a brand new CBS sitcom, in 2006. Jim identified with something out of the ordinary as soon as he read the pilot script. The character wasn't the culprit. Jim has stated time and time again that he had no personal connection to Sheldon Cooper. It was the conversation. Creator Chuck Lorre insisted on a second audition after he entered the room and gave a performance that was so accurate and well-balanced. Lorre wanted to confirm that what Jim had just done was not an anomaly and that he could repeat it. Jim returned and repeated the action. For 12 seasons, Sheldon Cooper would be defined by the same accuracy, rhythm, and strange enchantment. He therefore understood the music portion. Reviews of The Big Bang Theory were divided when it debuted on September 24, 2007. Viewers adored music, this program about socially awkward scientists, but critics weren't sure what to think of it. With more over 12 million viewers per episode by season 3, it was CBS's best-watched program. Jim was also gathering prizes in the same way that people gather coffee mugs. In 2010, 2011, 2013, and 2014, he took home the Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series. In 2011, he was awarded a Golden Globe. From 2009 until 2014, he received an Emmy nomination each and every year. His pay was commensurate with his power. He inked deals with co-stars Kay Cuoco and Johnny Galecki in 2010 that guaranteed them $200,000 per episode. By 2014, that figure had increased to 1 million episodes per season, in addition to more than 1% of the show's revenue. Forbes called Jim the highest-paid television actor in the world between 2015 and 2018. He made $27.5 million in 2017 alone. Not bad for a Houston-born theater kid who lived in poverty in New York for years. He continued to do theater even while he dominated television. He debuted on Broadway in 2011 in the music, AIDS Crisis play The Normal Heart, directed by Larry Kramer. For Jim, who has been with his boyfriend Todd Spywax since 2002 and is gay. Music, it was a really intimate project. He as Lud P. Dow in a Harvey revival in 2012. He played the role of God in the 2015 film An Act of God. He made the decision to quit The Big Bang Theory in 2018. He appeared in The Boys and the band's 50th anniversary Broadway performance. The Tony Award for Best Play Revival went to that 2018 staging. Parsons and the rest of the actors returned to their roles in the 2020 movie version. Jim was never able to decide between theater and television. He managed to do both simultaneously with equal dedication and skill, music, until his body and mind eventually urged him to calm down. Do you think he would still be filming The Big Bang Theory today if he hadn't abandoned theater? However, The Big Bang Theory universe continued after the 2019 finale. The first was the 7-season prequel series Young Sheldon, which ended in 2024. Parsons did not make an on-screen appearance until the series' conclusion, but he did serve as executive producer and narrator. Then came The First Marriage between Georgie and Mandy, which is now a CBS spin-off. However, everyone's main concern is Stewart fails to save the universe, the most recent spin-off. This show is crazy. The first Big Bang Theory spin-off that isn't a prequel is presently in production at HBO Max. It takes place in the present and centers on Kevin Sussman's character, Stuart Bloom, a comic book store owner who is always unfortunate. The official description states that Stuart unintentionally causes a multiverse Armageddon by breaking a gizmo that Sheldon and Leonard developed. He must now bring reality back to normal, running into Big Bang Theory characters from other universes. Lauren Lapkus is back in the cast as Denise, music, Stewart's girlfriend. John Ross Bowie returns as Barry Kripke, and Brian Posehn reprises his role as geologist Bert Kibler. Furthermore, Sheldon and Leonard's device is mentioned explicitly in the concept, indicating that they play a key role in the story. Will Jim Parsons then show up? Parsons has stated his stance clearly in several recent interviews. He is not going to be. Is this, however, a marketing ploy to take people by surprise? Jim isn't ruling out the possibility of him coming back. Is he interested in going back? This is the reason Stewart is unable to save the universe. Technically, Sheldon, Leonard, and the rest of the original cast can be brought back without having to play their precise parts again because it deals with various realities in different universes. They may play Sheldons from other eras, Sheldons from malevolent universes, and Sheldons with different decisions. In essence, the multiverse assumption gives the authors complete freedom to do what they like. Even though Sheldon's story is finished, there are still a lot more unpublished Sheldon stories, music, because of the universe. It's unclear if Jim will exploit that weakness. When questioned directly about Jim and Johnny Galecki's comeback, franchise creator Chuck Lurie has been noticeably cryptic. He doesn't confirm or deny, which in Hollywood typically indicates that talks are still going on. Jim hasn't exactly been unwinding since leaving The Big Bang Theory. He played Michael again in the 2020 movie adaptation of The Boys and the Band. His portrayal of Henry Wilson in the Netflix limited series Hollywood earned him an Emmy nomination. Spoiler alert, a romantic drama about a relationship impacted by terminal cancer, featuring him in 2022. Music, Parsons' poignant, vulnerable performance earned the movie considerable critical acclaim. Additionally, Parsons made a comeback to Broadway in 2024, appearing in Mother Play and Our Town performances. For Mother Play, he was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Play. In order to stay connected to Sheldon Cooper without having to don the superhero t-shirts, he has also continued to serve as executive producer and narrator for the Big Bang Theory franchise. Sheldon Cooper's return is desired by fans. The figure is recognizable. A generation of television humor was characterized by Parsons' portrayal. Bazinga became part of the cultural vocabulary. The couch became a hallowed place for Sheldon. But will it be worthwhile to bring Sheldon back?